When you're traveling, you have those dreams of home. What do you want to do? David says, I wish I could get a drink of water from my well. 3 of his biggest fighters get behind the enemy ranks, get to that well, fill up a pitcher, come back to him. Ta-da! Want a drink, David? And David is about to pour it, and he says, where do you boys get this from? So David, it's from your well in Bethlehem. So how do you do it? So we snuck behind enemy lines. You guys put your life in jeopardy? Yes, sir. We admire you. We love you. Want you to have it. David's about to put it to his mouth, takes it down, pours it onto the ground and says, I cannot jeopardize the sacred right of another person to enjoy something for my pleasure. If he had reacted the same way when he saw Bathsheba, all of Old Testament history would have been different. Ladies and gentlemen, especially to you gentlemen, I want to say this. We need to know where our boundaries are, where the lines are that we need to draw, what is sacred, what is fulfilling, and I know whereof I speak. 4 decades on the road and the temptations never diminish. There's always somebody who wants to buy you. There's always somebody who wants you to cross a boundary. And as Chesterton said, whenever you remove any fence, always pause long enough to ask why it was put up there in the first place. Think about that. And so I ask you, are there boundaries you have set up beyond which you will not cross? That's what really makes the leader who can mentor the younger ones so that the younger ones can look up to them and say, that man or that woman is my leader, knew what lines not to cross. I've seen this happen again and again in both directions. You know, most of India's leaders who hosted the Commonwealth Games are in jail today because they were bought. They were bought. In Hindi, they say, "Mej ke niche," under the table. It's under the table. It's under the table. When I was in France having dinner with the leader of their business school and the head of Carrefour, the CEO, both of these men were completely non-theistic in their thinking. I was hosted by a Chinese businessman who's become a close friend, and my wife sitting next to me. And they asked me, what do you normally speak on? I said, well, sometimes in schools I'll speak on ethics and so on, trying to find some common ground. Do you know what the president of the business school in Paris told me? One of the best in all of Europe. He said, we don't teach ethics in our school. I said, really? So conversation changed. A few minutes later, we were talking about the election coming up in which Hollande was going to win. He said, you know, we had 3 of our graduates running, but they all knocked themselves out. One was an alcoholic, one was a womanizer, and the third was arrested for corruption. And my wife leaned over and said, maybe they should be teaching ethics in their schools. I said, the whole issue, what do you compromise? Now, when I think of a principle like that, you know, not to jeopardize the sacred right of another, as far as I know, I haven't sold my soul to anybody in my travels. I haven't sold my convictions, as far as I know that. But then I look back after 4 decades on the road and I see my children now grown up and 3 little grandchildren. And I say to myself, boy, they're now adults. The 18 years came and went so soon. Did I sacrifice them as I was about what I thought was a noble profession? Most of our problems that are going on in our cities, because there's not a father or a mother there to give them the values and give them the ethics that helps a young man to be a gentleman and a young woman to grow up to be a young lady, so that they know what virtue is all about and what respect is all about, and the way you speak to people and the way you treat your fellow human being. This stuff has to be done at home. That's how we produce leaders. This stuff has to be done at home. You produce a young man and a young woman who carries with dignity that life. And so, as I leave this with you as my second thought, I just want to look at this thought and close with a final idea. Dr. Minathan Meyer, talking about businessmen, say this: We are convinced that many people choose happiness but still do not obtain it. The reason for this is that even though they choose to be happy, they seek for inner peace and joy in wrong places. They seek for happiness in materialism and do not find it. They seek for joy in sexual prowess but end up with fleeting pleasures and bitter long-term disappointments. They seek inner fulfillment by obtaining positions of power in corporations and government or even in their own families by exercising excessive control. But deep inside they are unfulfilled. I've had millionaire businessmen come to my office and tell me they have big houses, yachts, condominiums in Colorado, nice children, a beautiful mistress, an unsuspecting wife, secure corporate positions, and suicidal tendencies. They have everything this world has to offer except one thing, inner peace and joy. They came to my office as a last resort, begging me to help them conquer the urge to kill themselves. Why? The answers are not simple. The human mind and emotions are a very complex, dynamic system. I don't know Tiger Woods, but I watched his interview after he spoke to the press for the first time, and my heart really went out to him. Nobody wants to be just that shattered, especially in public. And one of them looked at him and said, which I thought was quite ironic coming from the media, they looked at him and said, "How could you lie to so many for so long?" I've had a question for some of them as well. How could you lie to so many for so long? Woods answered the only way he could have properly answered. He said, because I first lied to myself. I don't know him, but if I had a chance, I'd say, Tiger, what were you lying to yourself? What were you saying? It's possible he could have said, that I'd never get caught. But I would like to hear him say, I thought that's where my happiness lay, and it wasn't there. Stolen waters are not sweet. They have a bitter aftertaste. You must not jeopardize the sacred right of anyone else. And lastly, it is a beautiful little verse from Solomon himself, and he makes this simple comment: if you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. Well, not a very aesthetic sounding verse. If you find honey, eat just enough of it, too much of it, and you will vomit. What is he talking about? A balanced life. You must balance the spirit, the material, success, humility, power, surrender, family, public place, and the arena. You must have a balanced life. And as I bring this to a close, I have just two things with which to apply. Both of them have to do with relationships because of where Ayakoka left us, and then I close. It is this. An Olympic medalist phoned me one day from 2,000 miles away from Atlanta and said, I want to come and see you. I recognize the name. He flew in. Solidly built guy. Powerfully built. He said, do you know who I am? I said, yes, sir, I sure do. He said, can we go and have lunch? I had no idea why he'd come. Absolutely no idea. He started talking about the books and the radio program and all that were ministering to him. I was very encouraged by that. He said, do you know why I'm here? I said, no. He said, Ravi, from the time I was 12, my goal in life was to win the gold in the Olympics. I bought myself a camera. I filmed the world champion stride by stride by stride. And when the Olympics finally came for me to take part in my event, I was still a few seconds off the mark, and my coach never thought I was going to make it, but somehow I got selected. I started shattering all records in my heats, and all of a sudden, I was in the final. And millions of people were watching and cheering me on. I couldn't believe this moment had come. From the age of 12, my dream was about to come true, and the way I'd been performing in the heats, I was now being tipped to win the gold. He said, something happened just before the bullet was sounded. He said, for a fraction of a moment, I lost my concentration because I asked myself the question, I wonder if my father is watching. Because his dad always told him he was wasting his time, he was never going to succeed and never came for the Olympics. And the thought is my daddy watching. So the gun was sounded, I lost a stride. And I ended up with the bronze. I said, that's not too bad, is it? He said, no, sir, but I'd give it up for the love of my father. I'd give it up to be recognized by my dad. Switch gears. My grandson is 3 years old Jude. He can talk a mile and a half. Somebody once said to Winston Churchill, I've never told you about my grandchildren, have I? He said, no, and I want you to know how much